Yeah, so hi, nice to see everybody. I'm glad hope you're all having a good time with the talk so far, and thanks for joining us. Our talk is about how a physical card game called Alphabirds became a single player video game called Birdigo. We'll start off by just quickly running through who we are. John, would you like to go first?
Absolutely. My name is John August. I am mostly a screenwriter, but I have a lot of little side projects. As a screenwriter, my credits include Big Fish, Charlie's Angels, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Go, Corpse Bride. I'd love to make movies on a big screen, but I also like to make things for smaller screens. And those include things for the Macintosh. I make Highland, which is an app for writing screenplays on your computer. Weekend Read, which is an app for reading scripts on your phone. I love just being able to create new things. And so I've had the opportunity to create a few physical games over the years and physical things. And this is an extension out of that. Corey, tell us who you are.
I'm a game developer. I've made a few Thinky Sokoban-like games like Pipe Push Paradise, Hiding Spot, and Bonfire Peaks. This is a departure for me. I honestly, I didn't even know these games all that well before this, but it really took over my world while we worked on them. And why don't we tell you a little bit about the game we made? Vertigo
Please.
is John, please. Please walk us through what Vertigo is.
So Birdigo for me is taking a lot of what I love about roguelike games, deck building games, and applying them to words. And so I love word building games. I love Scrabble, love those kinds of games. And as I was seeing the mechanics of Balatro and other games that were coming out, I saw well, they're all about assembling things together, and assembling words is a fun way to do this. And so, this is inspired by Alphabirds, which we'll talk about in a sec. But the actual game is you are given a handful of letters, and you need to form words out of there. And so you can form any words you want, as long as they sort of are things in a Scrabble type dictionary. You can put them, in any order. You get the choice of which letters you want to assemble. Different letters have different values based on the material that the letter is made of. So there's the standard white letters, there's gold letters, there's diamond letters. And if it were just assembling the words, it would be fun for a while. But what really mixes it up is feathers and songs that change the nature of how the game works. And so you are going down this journey to try to hit certain point totals so that you can hit your goals and finally complete the migration, which is what we call a run in Vertigo.
Yeah, interesting to think about, like thinking of it as building words and building a build, as they're often referred to. When it clicked for me is when I started thinking of them almost like programming games, like Zack-like games, where you're like, oh, my goal is to output this, and I have to be creative and build a machine that can output that. Whereas, just in this case, the thing you're outputting is a high score. So you're building, thinking of it as a machine almost that you're putting together, really made it make sense to me in a new way.
Yeah, I like that phrase, David, because the word is the input. Like the letters are how you're sort of getting there, but like just making the word itself is not going to get you to those higher distances that you actually need to achieve. So you need to think about like, okay, doing this, what are going to be the multipliers? What are going to be the things that will impact what that final score calculates out as? And it just scratches kind of the right itch for me in terms of it's both everything I love about words, but it's also the nerdery of like trying to hit those goal targets.
Absolutely. Yeah. And finding ways to like create synergies between the different choices a player can make. And so this all started as a physical card game, as we've said. So why don't you tell us about how did that come about? It was like 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right. So we started with Alphabirds 10 years ago. This was just an office game that we play. So generally in our office where everyone's assembled to make the software that we make, we on Friday afternoons will play a game. So starting at 3 o'clock, we call it beer o'clock, have some beers and play a game. And one of the games that we ended up sort of developing in that office was originally we were calling it Sparrow. It was the idea of you have some letter cards and you're trying to make words either on your own board or other people's boards. So we printed some test decks. Originally, it was just like Sharpies on cards. We printed some test decks, and then we printed some real decks with letter cards. And so we have, the letters here, and then special cards that could mix it all up, like swap cards and other things that would change it. And so what we loved about Alphabirds as a game is that it was super casual. Like you on your turn, you draw 2 cards, you play one in front of you and one in front of any other player. It was really easy to learn, and you only had responsibility when it was your turn. And so you would, draw 2 cards, play them, and then you were done until it was your turn again. So you could have a conversation, you could drink a beer, you could do other things, and you weren't like constantly having to focus on what was happening there. So it was a great multiplayer, simple game. It did not translate very directly to a video game because you had to have at least 3 or 4 or 5 people to play with you. And so as I was thinking about this as how could we do this as a video game, it needed to make sense as a solo game. And that's why I started thinking about it as a roguelike, where it's like it's the challenge is not against another player, but against the system itself.
Mm-hmm. And so when we first started working together, you have a popular screenwriting podcast called Script Notes that I am a fan of. You announced that you were wanting to make this game and looking for a collaborator. So I reached out and you sent me a pretty fleshed out design document of like, this is what it should be. How did you get that ball rolling initially and decide on, okay, I really do, this is the shape of this game?
So I've had really good luck throughout my career at finding collaborators to work with. And one of the most crucial things about finding a collaborator is getting somebody who understands what it is you're going for. And so some of my best work and luck has been finding collaborators through the Script Notes podcast. So I host just a podcast every week called Script Notes, which is about screenwriting and things that are interesting to screenwriters. And not only are they a lot of aspiring writers listening to it, but also a lot of just cool people listen to it. And so I put out notice on Script Notes that I was wanting to develop a game that was a roguelike deck builder. I sort of in general terms. And I was looking for a collaborator who knew how to do this. I wanted somebody who could really take charge of this project. And that's kind of all I said on the air, but there was a link in the show notes to a Notion page, which outlined really specifically what it was I was trying to do and what I saw the game being like, what our collaboration would be like. That I really wanted a person who had experience building these kinds of games. It could work largely independently, but who I could sort of check in with, weekly or so to really refine how the whole experience was working. Included in that was a keynote, a Mac keynote slide deck, really sort of drawing the wireframes of what this all should look like in my head. So it was a clear picture of what it was that's supposed to be happening here. So we got about 20 people wrote in saying like, I think I'm your person. And so I read through those. I interviewed some of those people on Zoom. I met with Corey and we just clicked. And I really liked the vibe. I liked the other games he'd done. I liked his taste. I liked that he was a one-man band who could sort of do all these things himself. And we just talked about the game and decided to work together on this project. But Corey, I'm curious from your side, what was it like first hearing the call and then deciding to get engaged? Because this was a different thing for you too.
Yeah, so I was deep in a different project and needed a breath of fresh air. So it couldn't have been more. It just felt like perfect timing. Also, and also was the other project I was making a lot of decisions. I like the idea of like executing somebody else's vision on something, and I'd still like to do more of that. So that made it really exciting to me. And again, knowing, broadly knowing your taste from your work, but knowing you from having a parasocial relationship with you from your podcast, I got a sense of like, oh, it would be a pleasant experience collaborating. So I'm glad it ended up being largely frictionless throughout. I think there's like one thing I pushed on that you didn't let me have. And then everything else we're 100% in sync.
Corey, I genuinely wonder. I don't recall what that was. So, but let's have a conversation. Let's have a discussion also about the kind of things we would go back and forth about. So, tell me what it is, but then let's talk about the other things decided along the way.
Sure. So the one thing that I would change about Birdigo is making the starting deck much leaner. Right now, it has a standard Scrabble-like distribution, which is why we call it the classic deck. And then you earn a leaner deck, but the leaner deck makes adding cards to your deck so much more impactful that I found that when I was starting with the classic deck and I would get a letter reward, it was like it would just be a drop in the ocean, and I would like, oh, I'll see if I see that card, so there was that feeling of wanting to really craft my deck. And then that's the thing, it's like once you unlock the lean deck, which you do so by finishing any one migration, it's definitely I think a better experience. But it's also, you don't get as many, if you want to write words with repeated letters, those won't come up very much in the lean deck, if at all. There's a lot of single letters and double letters, which are 3 and 4 copies in the classic deck. So it also depends on what kind of words you want to put together.
Well, we should talk about how we're collaborating and how we're having these discussions, because I think that was the thing that was really what I loved so much about this, is that we could both drop into the conversation, because you were doing the day-to-day work on this, and then as a thing would come up, we would have a discussion, debate. And even though I had these keynote slides, these wireframes that really showed the feel and flow of the game, you had some really important early discoveries and discussions that changed and transformed things. The most impactful was probably the idea of the migration. So in my initial slide deck for it, I thought the journey through this was essentially a tree that you were climbing, and there'd be branches that you could go off on, but you're essentially trying to reach the top of the tree. And you took the bird metaphor, which was honestly sort of imposed upon it, but it ended up working out really well. Usually the bird metaphor is well, what if it's a journey? What if it's a migration that the bird is going on and attracting other birds along the way? And each of these is a stopover along on that migration. And that was transformative, because while the main game loop is that building of words, using the letters in your hand to build words, the migration is the overall success and journey of the game. And that was your idea. And it came pretty early on. That was in the initial weeks of developing this.
Yeah, it was. I feel like also I wanted some opportunities for some subtle 3D geometry in the game or something, and was like, oh, I could make a really simple map of planet Earth, and then look up, okay, what are real migration patterns, so I don't have to invent them, and I'll just I just drew splines that match what real life birds are doing.
I was also really impressed. Sorry, I was going to say, I was also really impressed. You talk about the things you were finding out there in the real world. You were also, smart about incorporating existing materials into it that made sense. And so we licensed those cute pudgy birds, which are so iconic. But if you'd had to create each one of those from scratch, you'd still be making those right now.
Yeah, this is not the point of this talk, but I do feel there is a talk worth making, or something about ways that you can be efficient in game development that are, a lot of them are people look down on, like licensing art assets. But yeah, in the, it just, to me, it's there's so much work that is definitely custom you have to do on any one game, and so much stuff that doesn't exist already that you do have to make from scratch, that I don't understand game developers who are well, I have to model a trash can myself, when you could, there are countless trash can models to draw from. And I like to liken it to a filmmaker mentality of if you want to shoot something in an alley, you're an indie filmmaker, you're not going to build an alley, right? You'll find one that exists.
Absolutely.
As far as other things that might differentiate Alphabirds and Birdigo, you had, as you mentioned, the card classes, cards having different values. That was conspicuously not a thing in the physical card game, which I noticed some Scrabble players is hard to contend with. How did that decision
Yeah,
happen?
there's a sense coming from the Scrabble tradition that certain letters are harder to play, and so therefore should be worth a lot more. And the inspiration, the instinct behind both Alphabirds and Vertigo, I think, is a simplicity, a minimalism, a not having to do a lot of math yourself in it all. And so in Alphabirds, it's just the length of the word that matters, and we account for the fact that some letters are harder to use by making special combination letter cards that could be count as a Q, an X, or a Z. So they're worth any of those, and it's worth 2 points if you were to play one of those. The word counts as like it's one letter longer.
Right.
But again, trying not to math you out on it, so that it's actually just about the fun of discovering the word and seeing what's possible, rather than constantly trying to optimize things at every point. There's going to be people who are going to go for maximization, great, but like it's not the basic default setting for the game. And that's honestly probably ties into why I think the classic deck is the better place to start rather than the lean deck, because the lean deck to me it gets you much more into that maximizing mentality, right? The optimizing mentality right from the start.
That makes sense. So you touched on minimalism. That's like the next two slides are kind of on that topic. One thing that's really to turn me off about deck builders is the amount of UI and the amount of the onboarding process, that I'm like, I have to learn about 7 different types of things, let alone how they interact with each other, and make sense of this, like, the light show going on with all the UI. I loved that your instinct was to be like, how few things can we put on screen at once? And how do we make sure that the player's eye is focused where it needs to be, as opposed to maybe the maximizing the slot machine effect of these kinds of things. Did you ever have any doubt about that, or was that pretty much decided early?
Yeah, I love that we were on the same page as that, but I think I was pushing you often for like take things off the screen, and just really try to keep things as clean. And because you were creating these great backgrounds, and you end up like sort of expanding upon those backgrounds with days and nights in different environments, I wanted to see those things. A great example is at the top of the screen, we have your feathers and your songs. But what I push for is that we should not see the slots for the feathers and songs until you actually have some things up there. So, because as I was looking at if you're starting the game and there's these empty things, you're wondering what goes in those slots. What am I doing wrong? And then once you actually have something to put in those slots, there's slots there, and you see how many possible places there are to do things. It doesn't need to be there until you need to have it there. I think it was also very insistent on making sure that the metaphor of these are like cards being laid out, and they come in from the left and they go off to the right. That seems so simple, but it's really what allows it to feel physical in a way that is right, and sort of how things animate in and out. It contributes hugely to it. I think you've done a great job fine-tuning the timing on and how everything is appearing and disappearing.
Thanks. Yeah, like I do feel like that kind of thing, the more time you take with it, or like, sometimes shaving half a second off of a UI animation makes it suddenly it feels completely differently, and experimenting there is really important. So yeah, as far as also, so in the UI, we went minimal, sound design and music also. I think initially like the first thing I sent you was kind of percussive, and you're like, nope. Like that we were like, let's scale back, and like I started thinking about the Brian Eno says about ambient music. It should be as interesting as it is ignorable.
Yes.
And I was trying to go for something like that, where it's like it's pleasant, it's nice to pay attention to, but it's easy to ignore also. And then that just kind of was on the same page as everything else.
It's chill, and it goes into the background, and it feels like the right vibe for the birds and everything else around you. And I think the Eno quote is right. You can notice it, but also if you don't pay attention to it, it's also fine too. And the game can be stressful as you're sort of getting to those things. Am I actually going to be able to get through this this challenge? Am I going to make it through this round? but the music isn't underscoring that. It's not adding to the tension. It's just you can create your own tension there.
As for so I was thinking of design challenges we faced, and there were a handful. One thing that sprung to mind is that so for example in Balatro, which I had no intention of playing, and now I've played a lot thanks to this experience. I fell in love with it anyways, but then yeah, so in that game, if you have a flush or if you have a straight just by looking at the cards. Whereas we had that additional friction of you had to find a word. So it's not just thinking of like, okay, well, how's it going to interact with the feathers, the things I have equipped, and the thing, but you also have that extra moment of having to look. And I think we got away with it, or we get away with it more because of the minimalism and the slowness. Whereas if there was a sense of this is like chugging along, then you would kind of feel the dead stop every time you're looking for a word. I don't know.
Yeah, I think another thing which we discovered as we were sort of alpha testing and beta testing with some folks is we had to change the terminology on some things, because originally it was like speed and power. Right now it's flaps and power, but speed. And so players would play the game and they're like, oh, I don't want to feel like I'm rushed. I have to get the speed down. Like they thought speed was a thing on their side rather than on the bird's side. So finding flaps as a metaphor for how many times you're flapping your wings, and power being the thing. It's all bullshit. It's all made up, but it's making sure that there are two variables that felt right, and then figuring out like which of the songs and the feathers should impact flaps or power, understanding that, basic math means you need to be thinking about increasing both of them in order to get the kind of multiplier effect that you want.
Yeah,
so
it can't be
that aspect of just under the hood design became really important.
Absolutely. So we've still never been in the same room together.
Nope.
So that's, I think, a common for a lot of teams in this community. You find your chat software that works for you. In our case, Slack, and we had this really great workflow of using Google Sheets with a plugin called Bobbin, developed by Robert Yang, that I found on GitHub, and was able to just link the Google Sheet straight into the Unity project. And so anytime I'd open the Unity project, it would check if there's any changes. And that way you'd be able to tune text and numbers and whatever else without ever having to install Unity. And that was just like as a way for, like a frictionless way to collaborate in this way that really worked well for us.
Yeah, it is crazy that so much of the under the hood stuff in terms of the values and how things interact is just a Google Sheet that I could touch and probably mess up at times too. But it made things really fast for us, because I'm hours away from you, and whenever I got to a thing, I could do it, and then I could add a bunch of stuff in Slack and say like, hey, I added details and names for these feathers, or I renamed these things. You didn't have to copy and paste and change stuff in your coding. It's also a very smart design on your side, because you've made a very flexible modular system for how these things work under the hood and how they impact stuff. So everything's not bespoke coded in there for each one.
Exactly. Yeah. There's like a form you fill out when making a new feather card or whatever, where you'll say it's like if blank, then blank, and do blank, and like you're just deciding what the blanks are, and then so it was a really fun system to set up to like then make it frictionless, like you say, not having to make bespoke code for every situation, really making it adaptable to whatever the ingredients you want to put together happen to be. I'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge this. There a lot of people got inspired at the same time to make a word-based roguelike game. I know how I feel about it. How do you feel about it, John?
Listen, listen, I work in the entertainment industry where we're making films and TV shows, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, like you stole my idea!" It's like no one stole your idea. It was like it was the right idea out there in a time. And so with the success of Balatro and roguelikes, it was a very natural idea to say like, "Oh, well, what if you could combine these two, put these two flavors together?" I like that we put the two flavors together in a very different way than a lot of these other ones, which feel more Scrabble tiley. Just there's no extra metaphor for it. It's just make words, make words. Ours is unique and weird and cute and chill in a way that's actually really fun. But I'm not surprised that there's a bunch of other games that are trying the same mechanic because it's a good idea. People are going to do things that are good ideas. How are you feeling about it?
Well, I feel the same way. It's like validating that it was like oh, I could see why all these exist because we all it was so natural. I think as a designer, it's exciting to like see a similar germ of an idea like sprout into these very different games.
And it's interesting to see that like most of them took the tile idea of like each letter has a specific value from Scrabble and took that much more directly, and we didn't. Our material has become much more important.
Yeah, that's right. What's next? I just quickly wanted to mention we have an iOS and Android port that I have slowly begun development on. As well as plans for new feathers and eggs and things that'll benefit the Steam version and the iOS version. It's really fun to work on, and so we're not going to stop for the time being.
Yeah, and I would say that a surprise for me is I'm generally not a big Steam games player, and so it was fun to learn a lot about Steam games doing this. I played on my Steam Deck, I played on the Mac. I had anticipated that typing would work so well to enter words, and that typing would be my default way to play it. I'm excited for an iPad and iPhone version because it's such a good casual game that there's not a ticking clock on it, so you can play it kind of whenever. It feels like a really natural game to be playing on casual devices, and so I'm excited to see how people will respond to our new version of it as we ship that.
Yeah, almost all the time I spent on it was playing on the Steam Deck on a couch. So yeah, I can confirm it's a great on the go experience. So that's us and fit pretty cleanly into the time window. Don't know if we have time for questions.
Yeah, perfect timing. Thank you both. I'll ask a couple of questions because some things came through in the chat as well. So the first one wasn't actually a question, but I can formulate it into a question because I'm also interested in this. Luis, who works on the Thinky Games team, pointed out how he really appreciated how you could have builds that were based around shorter words in Vertigo. And I also really appreciated that. When I played it, my first build was entirely based around like 5-letter words or something, because I hate doing anagrams. So if I can do 5-letter anagrams, I absolutely, that's my way to play. Was that an intentional, were you thinking about that when building the game? Were you thinking about making it more approachable in that way?
For sure, on my side, definitely. And as we looked at sort of what those initial feathers were going to be, it's really like, okay, rewarding certain word lengths. And so that your instinct is to play towards those word lengths made a lot of sense. And so not also adding the odds and the evens thing. So word lengths that are 2, 4, 6 versus 3, 5, 7. It was fun. And again, like people coming out of the Scrabble tradition, you think like, oh, you need to go for the longest words. But like true Scrabble experts will tell you that like, sometimes the most powerful words are the really short ones that could just connect to a lot of other things.
I love that we could I very quickly found a synergy between like odd number of letters in a word and also a short word length. And then it's just, I think in a lot of the other games that are in a similar space, it takes a lot longer to find those synergies. But in this case, like finding that really early was very satisfying, and I really enjoyed that. One last question before we move on to the next talk. Waika in the chat was asking whether you've thought about adapting this to other languages, or is that just not on the table at all?
Corey, my instinct is like, while I would love to do that, I also just feel like we know English and we sort of have a sense of what's going to work there. And I think we would probably screw it up if we try to do it in another language. Is honestly my instinct. Corey, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, that's my instinct too. Though I've seen some other games in this space have done like mods or whatever, or made it. Hey, if you upload a dictionary here, you can play in your language of choice or whatever, and that also takes away the responsibility of sanitizing the dictionary.
Yeah,
putting that on the player, because that's the thing is like of course, we took the time that you do to make sure that there's nothing problematic in your word list. It's a lot harder to do when you're like, you don't speak the language. So.
Perfect. Thank you both. That's all the questions we've got time for. As per usual, if folks want to ask more questions, you can take them to Discord. I'm sure Corey will be there. I'm not sure, John, do you use Discord? Would you?
I do, yeah. So I'll take a peek too.
Okay, awesome, perfect. So yeah, thank you both, and we'll move on.
Wonderful.
To the next
Thank you so much. A pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.